All right, guys, I am Lindsay Benton. I am your presenter tonight for homeownership, not if, but when. We teach a homeowner how to buy a home and get a loan, but we don't. I think what I realized is that we weren't starting with the core of why this is the passion, right? So is everyone even bought into the concept, and or have they had the conversations? And we were just talking about that here at the office. I mentioned a friend of mine who's 40 years old. She'd been in the military for 16 of those years, and no one had ever even talked about it, and brought it to her. And I'm hoping she's on. She's in Texas. But I am running the chat. Are you in the chat now, Lisa? Okay, perfect. So Lisa Zita is in the chat. And so I'm going to turn off video and chat so I can just focus and not get distracted with the shiny scrolls. Anyways, I wanted to have these conversations. And yeah, James and I were just talking about this. I think that people are afraid to talk about money. And I think that that is very applicable, especially when you maybe have an unhealthy relationship with money, and money is programmed into us by families. I mean, money is complex. I personally view money as a vehicle. I see my currency as time. That takes a lot of work to get there. And so I'm not saying that you should be there today. But once you're there, then talking about money doesn't bother you, because for you, it's just something you can make more of. You cannot make more of time. So back onto the plan. 90% of millionaires created their wealth through real estate, or at least a portion of it. 90% of billionaires also have, just owned homes. Very few are doing it without, for instance, the first Facebook, but now of course he's continuing to invest. Homeowners have 44 times the wealth of renters. That is so brutal to me. 44 times. It's brutal. So yeah, you got to buy. We need renters, but a lot of times you can own a property and still be a renter. So let's not forget that. Presenting today is me. Next time it'll be somebody else. I'm adding this to our core classes. I find it super important. So you may be seeing some of these folks teaching in the future. Who we are friends who became colleagues, and colleagues who became friends. We have a very important and prioritized culture here, and anyone who is a part of it is absolutely an amazing human. So I look forward to you meeting them along the way. Our core belief is that everyone thrives when they feel at home. That is for rentals, that is for home ownership, and that is definitely here at this brokerage. We want all of our clients to feel comfortable and be, quote, at home. Our mission is to provide if you've been to any of our classes, we always go over this. So just someday you'll have it all memorized as well. But provide the most professional and personalized experience in the industry by educating and empowering you to make your real estate goals a reality, all while minimizing your stress, maximizing your investment, and laughing a little along the way. Sums it up. Now let's get to the meat. Homeownership. It really is that good. And I think that that's something that I wanted to process through with everyone. It is simple, not easy. And then let's play a game of what if. So that's our agenda for tonight. It really is that good. I think it's really easy to talk about the financial benefits and probably what a lot of people hear about, but I want to start there and then dig into some of the other things that are benefits of home ownership. It may be cheaper for you to rent today. I doubt it in the Denver metro area, but it could be cheaper for you to rent today, or maybe you have a bunch of roommates or whatever it is, than it is for you to buy. But that is a very short-term approach. The truth is interest rates are going to go up eventually. I don't have a crystal ball with that. They're going to go up, and your rent will too. Rents went up 25% in the last year in Denver proper, and that is brutal. That is an average number. And so we've also been adding some luxury properties, et cetera. But tax benefits, they vary based on what the current tax code is, but they always are in favor of property owners versus renters. Currently, as an investor, you have a lot more tax benefits even than you do as a primary residence holder. And excuse me, the standard deduction was put up. And so people are less likely using, I don't even want to know what Amy's pointing out right now. Anyways, You get to write off the depreciation on an investment, which is huge. And then the interest you get to do on your investment and your primary and property taxes on both as well. The interest on a HELOC is you can only write that off of an investment, et cetera. These are obviously, I should give the disclosure, I am not a lawyer nor an accountant. What else am I not? I guess those are the big ones. I am a real estate agent and a business owner and an investor. So I topically know enough knowledge with that. But the tax benefits increase the more and more properties you own because the current tax code was pushed through during the Trump administration, which was in favor of real estate investors. You get to enjoy, though, growing your wealth with tax-free with your capital gains. So if you're selling a primary residence and you have increased the value of that property by $250,000 as a single person and $500,000 as a married person, then you get to take that money and move on to whatever you want to do with it without having to pay capital gains taxes on it. You don't even have to move it into the next home. So that's a huge piece of it. That's something that we fight for to keep it as a part of the tax code for sure. You're getting, and then the short and simple of it is you're getting appreciation on the entire value of your residence. And then you're also being forced into a savings account because instead of paying your rent to somebody else's mortgage, you're paying your rent to yourself as the mortgagee, and you are getting to buy down that principal and then also as it's appreciating. So basically you're putting it into a savings account. So in 30 years, you're going to own it outright, which seems like a long time, but it appreciates fast enough and you can always pay it down sooner. But ultimately, that's how I looked at it. The first place I bought, I was 22. It was 2005. And like the economy was awesome, right? Like things were driving. I was in sales. I was making good money. Thank God I bought a condo because I'd have nothing to show for it. But then the recession hit and I was like, I just have to hold on to this. I just have to hold on to this. And I saw a 40% decrease, if not 50%, depending upon what numbers you look at, of income. And I just always made sure I paid my mortgage first because I knew it was my ticket to ride right through it. So it is that forced savings account. And I do joke that if I didn't buy that when I was 22, I would have literally nothing to show for my 20s, but like a lot of really intoxicated photos. It really is that good. A lot of people are talking about inflation and its inevitability, and then as well as interest rates going up. Ultimately, the absolute best way to hedge against inflation is to lock in a low interest payment on an appreciating asset. The best way to do that is through real estate ownership. Right. The cost of waiting, I have a great video. We're going to come back to that if we have time. I want to make sure we get through the core info here. This is Nicole Ruth. She's #1 lender in Colorado, but more importantly, a very generous and intelligent woman who can help with any of your questions. Her and her team do an excellent job of helping you understand how to buy a home and what you need to do to get there. All right, next element of why it is really that good. And I think this stuff really outweighs the financials. And it was a big piece when I talk about, I lived in my first place until 2013. So I was there 8 years. There was a little part where I left. That's a different story for a different day. But for there, I was my primary residence for 8 years. And what I loved the most is like, I didn't have to worry about where I was going. I saw other friends in their 20s being like, okay, where do I have to go next? Are we going to re-up our lease? Oh, they're increasing it. Oh, all of that. And I always knew I was coming home somewhere. And then also like, I never did, but I was like, it's so cool that I could like paint the walls if I wanted to. I didn't, I just left them because it's a lot. I did renovate the bathroom though. And that was fun to be able to do, do work within my own walls. So the psychological benefits come to that. I mean, really the ultimate benefit is stability. And I think that we all especially learned during the pandemic is like, we need that home space, that home base. And as we continue to try to help our friends who are between homes or unhoused at this time, like housing stability is the number one factor in how you're going to be able to hit your other two needs, of your three basic needs. If you have housing stability, that you're that much more likely to be clothed and fed as well. And so that is a psychological benefit, and it takes so much stress off. I think a lot of people who are between homes, once they find a home, no matter what their between homes looks like, once they're home, it's crazy when they feel that shed of stress and they no longer are worrying about that anymore. You're locking in a payment amount. Everyone's like, you're locking it in forever. Well, there are variables. Insurance can go up, and your taxes can go up. So those can vary. Also, insurance could go down and your taxes could go down. My guess is they won't. But with that, ultimately you are at least locking in your primary chunk of your payment. And so it's not going to fluctuate to where you're all of a sudden doubling in your payment. So that's a huge thing too, is you're not worried about that. And ultimately you're in control, and we're going to talk through some of those what ifs, but once you own the asset, you have options. When you rent someone else's asset, you don't have control. You have what the lease says, if they're going to honor it. And if they don't, then you have to decide if you're going to invest in that attorney, right? And so ultimately you have that control. There is data around children performing better in schools. And that again goes back to stability. I don't think it's homeownership versus if you're renting and you get to stay somewhere for 20 years, I think it's the same level, right? But it's that stability. Healthier living conditions. This one I think is kind of interesting, but from a landlord's point of view, you don't necessarily always inspect a home as much as you would if you were living in it, right? You don't know as much about the condition. And a lot of times renters assume like, I don't want to cause any problems because I don't want to not have my lease renewed, right? I want to have stability. And so having control of that. And another thing they mentioned is like what they're using to treat the grass with, what chemicals they're using to clean. There's all these things that are out of your control. I thought that was very interesting. Like I mentioned, the control of your aesthetic environment, you can change the color of the walls, you can do whatever you want. And then the rainy day fund, my uncle, who's an a financial advisor, and is extremely conservative on the financial front, says, get a home equity line of credit always on your primary property, because it is the best way to borrow against. It's basically a savings account sitting there. So for instance, if you own $100,000 home and you owe $50,000 on it, and you've paid it down to where you owe $50,000 on it, and the bank says you can borrow up to 80%, then you have $30,000, which is basically like a credit card line, but you're borrowing it from yourself. And so that is a huge way to get away from that brutal paycheck to paycheck, one emergency will ruin me financial mentality, because as we know, that's a very real thing for a lot of people. Then there's community benefits. Once you root in, you create these true relationships, you take better care of your homes, you're more likely to volunteer, and then you're also more likely to patronize and support local businesses. These are, again, pretty subjective, but I do think that they lead to one of the big benefits of homeownership, which is happiness. And again, that stability, which is funny because we were talking yesterday how I shouldn't even use that word, but stability in this case is like knowing where your head's going to rest every night. All right. It's simple, but it's not easy. I always say like anything that's worth it is not going to be super easy, but that doesn't mean it also has to be hard. The big thing is you're here right now on Zoom and I can't see you, but I know you're here because I can see the number. And I have 3 people in here just looking at me. This is very awkward teaching type, but that's okay. Anyways, if it's worth it, it's not going to always be easy. So in an ideal scenario, you're a W-2 employee, you've been in the same job for a long time, and you have very steady income. Don't want to have too many bonuses on there. That can get complicated, right? You have the 3 to 5% down payment. Maybe you have even more. Maybe you've been left some money and you want to use that for a down payment. Maybe a family member is going to gift it, but you have your own down payment. It does not need to be 20%. And I think that that's a myth that I always think I've busted it enough and then I haven't. So that is one that was brought up on my Facebook when I asked, but yeah, you don't need to put 20% down. There aren't huge benefits to putting 20% down, and the amount of time it takes you to save up 20% will cost you so much in the long run. And then, yeah, a 640 credit score is going to give you access to all the loan programs. And then it'll vary from there. The reality probably is that one of these isn't perfect. So you might be a 1099 or an independent contractor, own your own business, whatever your tax filings is, in which case they're going to want 2 years. Fannie Mae is now looking at, which is one of the big back end lenders, is looking now at 1 year as an option. And there's some lenders out there who can work around it. Maybe you have a cash income, and we dealt with this a lot once marijuana was legalized here, and we added an industry that was not able to get loans, right? And so there was a cash income. We have a couple of lenders that'll help with that. Maybe you don't have that 3 to 5%, but you're ready to go and you want to do this. And so you're going to look at the down payment assistance options, which are a huge opportunity. And we have helped so many clients get in with those programs. It's a great way to get your foot in the door. Maybe your credit's taken a hit because life is hard and credit is confusing. We're going to talk about that later. Credit repair and optimization, even if you're at 640, but there's a way you can get to 680, which would benefit you and your interest rate. Don't pay someone to do that for you. Align with a lender who can offer you those services and help you strategically. I will tell you that logic does not apply when it comes to credit repair and what you need to pay off versus what you want to keep open versus how much you want on this. So work with somebody who spends all day, every day learning that algorithm. All credit's not created equally. I met a man in Dallas. My stories used to go differently after that. I met a man in Dallas who wanted to buy a nice car. And so he didn't want to buy a home first because then he couldn't get the car. And I thought, shit, that's what people think. That is so interesting to me because we don't teach this in our school systems, or it's not publicly popular to talk about. Car credit to buy a car, you can always get a car. They'll always give you a car. Cars are depreciating assets. So it's like a consumer good. It's like basically going out and buying a bunch of shoes. You'll always be able to get a car. They've now made it to where education and student loans are pretty neutral, basically, and can be deducted from your debt to incomes, which we're not going into tonight. But the only thing that will positively affect your credit is home ownership. So if you really want that car, which I don't know what that is, it seems very unsafe, buy a house and then buy the car, because buying a house is only going to increase your credit score. So that to me was just like a very and it was a 28-year-old man. He was an adult. It wasn't like my son who's 4 saying like, I thought, which would be funny. But yeah, it's just all credit is not created equally. So talk to someone about that and think about your monthly payments. Oh, this is the worst one when I talk to people. You got to prioritize, like get your budget together, pay bills first, pay your savings next, and then have fun. You can't do it the opposite. And this was ingrained in me so much as a child. And I have only learned in adulthood that it wasn't the discussion in every family. And so I get it. For me, it's been like just my life. And I didn't always follow it. Don't get me wrong, but paying bills first, then your savings, and then have fun is the mentality. Does anyone else though feel like a dog chasing your tail? Because just when you get your savings up, you have some kind of annoying event. You get a flat tire and that costs you $500, or you get, right, and it starts eating away at it. Just know you're in good company and keep at it. This dog is cute. It was a good day, the day I figured out I could add gifts for everybody. Prioritize, be intentional with your spending. The worst thing you can do is be super reactive. Know what you're doing, know how you're prioritizing. And it's hard to prioritize when you don't have an end benefit or an end goal. And I do think that that's where home ownership can come into play, is if you know you're saving towards something and this bigger, greater step, it's easier to say, nope, can't go out tonight. I already went out once this week, which is what I've decided I'm doing because I'm saving towards this. When I bought my house, I was like, all right, I have to give up pedicures. And then I said, never mind, I'll give up a happy hour because pedicures are like my favorite. But figuring it out of like what I was going to sacrifice in order to be able to make that payment and live a higher level of lifestyle than I was living before that at 21 to 22. I am not the best budgeter, I have to be honest. I also have extremely reasonable taste. And so when I give people advice, I always say, once you start making more money, don't change your spending habits, right? If you were making life work on $50,000 a year and you get an income at 100, don't start spending like you make 100. You might have been spending like you were making 60 anyways. You got to pay off a little debt, right? And then you keep spending like you're making 50. And I think really thinking about life that way makes it easier to just always be creating those emergency funds and then eventual savings for yourself. One of my husband and I will always say pizza rolls when we talk about our simple lifestyle. I called him on the way home. This was when like 3 years ago, maybe. It was from the biggest closing night ever had. And I was like, it closed. And it was a tough one too. And I was like, it closed. It's closed. I was like, put in that pizza order. And babe, add those pizza rolls. I'm like, so long as me living the good life is adding $8 pizza rolls from Walnut Room, which are really good, extra ranch, then I know that I'll always be able to put money aside to invest in real estate, get back to the community, etc. And so, it's okay to treat yourself every once in a while, but don't start living outside your means. And that is tips from small town Illinois. Okay. What if? I hear a lot of these, and I had to say like that. I have a plan for that, which is so Elizabeth Warren, right? That was her whole campaign. I've got a plan for that. I've got a plan for that. I got a plan for that. This is where the freedom and the control I talk about is. If you want to move, you can move. That's fine. You're signing the day of that you're going to live in that property for at least the next year. Life can happen. You might have to move. That's okay. I get you have commitment issues. That seems like something you'd want to talk about with your therapist, but you can move. It's too small. It's too big. Cool. You can move, right? You own the asset. You have options. You can rent it out. You could sell it and buy another, right? Your job moves you. Same. You could sell it. You can rent it. You can buy another. I end up hating it. I hate that, but that's where we ended up, because you can sell it or you can rent it, right? Once you have that, once you have the asset, you have so many more options. I lose my job. Okay. Do you need to move in with family and rent it out? Where are you at on this? Could we rent out a room and then you have a roommate that's helping you until you find your next job or your next job? A recession hits. I already talked through my experience with the recession. You knuckle down and you do it, right? You definitely don't get the pedicures then. Trust me, that was a rough time. Things were not good. But whatever it is, you own the asset and you have options. And if you ever at that point of like, what do I do? Maybe I should sell it to Zillow, or maybe I should call the people on the signs on the side of the road. You call me first and I will find a way for you to keep your home. It is my biggest passion point. Once we get you into home ownership, I can't have you leaving it because it's so hard to get into in the first place. And I think it's even harder to get back into. So I will say, what else? If anyone has any other what ifs that they would like to hear my plan for. But ultimately, especially now with Airbnb, you're in a thriving, if you're in the Denver metro area, or if you're in other areas, like let's evaluate what it looks like. I mean, the likelihood of you having an appreciation, and even if worse comes to worse and you have to sell it in a year, the likelihood of you being able to get out without having to lose $1 is very high, which gives you even more freedom. All right, this is a video about us. I want to share with you the video from our numbers queen. She just put it out this is funny. It's a funny still too. She just put it out a couple weeks ago. So the numbers are pretty accurate. People will often ask, when should I have bought? And I will say, gosh, I wish I'd have bought more in 2008, right? 9, the 80s, but you can't turn back time. And so even if you're looking to get the perfect interest rate, or you're looking to get the perfect home or the perfect price point, Do not let perfectionism cause paralysis for you and procrastination, then paralysis. It is worth it to get in and get started. I don't know anyone who says to me, oh, dang it, I wish I'd have waited 10 years to buy my first house. That's just not how it works. And then you can start really thinking about, what your long-term wealth looks like. So cost of waiting, we'll let Nicole Ruth.
The market is nuts right now. And if you're a buyer, you're probably thinking, I'm just going to sit this one out. I'm going to wait. I'm going to wait to see what happens. I'm going to wait to see if the prices drop back down. I'm going to wait to see if maybe there's a little less demand, so there's not as much competitive bidding on the homes. I'm going to wait because at some point it's going to get easier. Well, my name is Nicole Ruth. I have that conversation daily. I get it. I get it. The market is nuts. We have to own that, right? There's not enough inventory. Even when we get a little bit more inventory, the market soaks it up again. Maybe we move from 4 days on the market to 6. So we got a couple extra days, right? Get a little bit more inventory. Maybe instead of 10 multiple offers, there's 2. Whatever that situation is for you, that's having you sit on the sidelines, waiting, thinking that that's okay, that's what I want to speak into today. Because ultimately, every decision we make has an opportunity cost, right? I mean, that's true in life of everything. And it works here as well. There is an opportunity cost of waiting. What if you're continuing to rent? Now, if you have a blessed situation, or maybe you're living in your parents' basement for free, maybe you're thinking that that cost of waiting isn't so much. And you're right, that cost of waiting is less, but I'm going to show you it's still a lot. The only difference is you don't have an outlay of rental expense going out every month. Your cost over here is still going to be higher the longer you wait. Those are the numbers we're going to go over today. There are a lot of numbers, and I can absolutely put this together so it's specific to you, specific to your price point, specific to the interest rate on the day that we talk, specific to the numbers that resonate with your scenario, and then compare that to what you're paying in rent. But for today, I just want to use an example to go through some of the numbers. And in the Denver market, the average priced home is a little under $6. And you don't have to, right? I mean, you can put 5% down, 3% down, depending on the price point. In this case, we land just under the conventional loan limit. So you have to take that into account as well. So 10% down, $65,000, $585,000 loan amount. We use an interest rate of 3.125. And you're like, wait a minute, interest rates are a little bit lower than that. And they are. But interest rates are going to start going up. It's not a matter of if, but when. So let's use 3.125, because the other side of that too is depending on your credit score, what kind of bumps and bruises you've had, that might be your interest rate, even though the market rate might be a little bit lower with a perfect credit score. So your total cash to close is going to be around $70,000. We threw in a little bit of money, $5,000 for closing costs. Closing costs could be anywhere from $5,000 to really $8,000, depending on the property taxes, the insurance, title, appraisal, and lender fees all go into that without even going into what does it look like to buy down the interest rate. And there's a cost for that. Whole nother video. We're going to stick to the cost of waiting. So this is my scenario, and I use a 30-year fixed amortization for all of these numbers. So what if we wait, right? So what if we purchase this home, and instead of purchasing it today, we wait 6 months, just 6 months. Given the fact that interest rates are expected to rise, especially at the end of 2021, depending on when you're watching this, and going into 2022. I know we're in a very volatile market right now, or I shouldn't say volatile, I should say that it is subject to change. But based on where we think we're headed, and when you're watching this, interest rates are going to start going up. So if I wait 6 months, the interest rates might tick up. So instead of 3.125, maybe it's 3.25. You're going to have appreciation. We're seeing incredible appreciation right now, 17% year over year. But at some point, we're going to go back to normal. And I want to show these cost of waiting numbers in a relatively normal market. Because in this market, the cost of waiting is extreme. And if I base everything on this market, you lost a lot of money if you didn't buy a year and a half ago. We all did, right? That's hindsight 2020, right? Looking in the future, even if I use a standard set of numbers, a more market average set of numbers, then maybe I have an interest rate that in the next 6 months, maybe my home, the interest rate goes up an 8, and the home appreciation, the cost of that home goes up maybe 3%, right? If that's the case, that home now is going to cost me more to buy because my 10% is based on the purchase price, and the purchase price has gone up 3%. It's also going to cost me more on a monthly basis because the interest rate has gone up from, say, a 3.125 to a 3.25. Different than at the beginning of the pandemic when interest rates were going down. Right now, we've been stable to where we think they're going to start going up. We have to take that into consideration as we decide what is the true cost of waiting. Well, that total cost on this chart shows us that the monthly difference is going to be $104 a month based on that higher interest rate. So that's an annual difference of about $1,200. It's also going to cost me about $1,700 more to purchase the home. So total, if I wait 6 months, in the first year alone, that home will cost me $3,000 more. And it will continue to cost me more every single year with that increased interest rate and that increased purchase price. If I wait a full year and say that home, say over the period of a year, that home appreciated, say 7.5%, and interest rates went up again, and this time maybe they went up to the mid-3s, 3.625. Based on the fact that the interest rates went up, and based on the fact that that home is now costing me more, if it's costing me 7.5% more, that monthly payment and my cost to close just went up. So now it's costing me $364 more a month. That total annually is just under $4,400. And if I add to that the fact that it cost me $4,700 more to purchase the home based on my line with 10% down, based on a higher purchase price, then that cost to me is $9,000 more in year one by having waited. In year two, we'll see the same thing. Again, appreciation, and it's going down, it's appreciating even at a lower amount because we know that's going to happen. The average appreciation in the United States historically is 3.9%. It was 3.6 before the pandemic. It's 3.9 now. Here in the Denver market, pre-pandemic, it was 6%. So that 6% growth is the opportunity in the future that by waiting, I'm missing out on. And so if I waited 2 years to purchase that same home, that appreciation, that cost of that home goes up. The interest rates will continue to go up. So that cost of that home is now going to be another $578 a month, which adds up. Over a year's time, that's almost $7,000 in per year in increased monthly payment. If I add that to the cost of an additional $11,000 just to purchase that more expensive home, that's $18,000 for that first year. Additional that I'm going to have to put into that home that I wouldn't have had to if I didn't wait those 2 years. In addition to that, I have to think about the fact that I'm renting, unless I'm living in my parents' basement. It's viable, I totally get that. But if I'm paying to rent somewhere, I'm renting, and I'm paying somebody else's retirement plan. I'm paying another landlord to pay down their principal, to pay down their debts. Because they didn't have this opportunity cost because they bought. So this is the cost additional on a monthly basis. By waiting, you also have those costs that I added in for just the additional cost of the down payment because I'm purchasing a more expensive home, assuming I want that same home, right? So I added the numbers from the first slide to the second slide. Those add up and they add up fast and they're real. They're real dollars out of pocket. That cost of waiting also has an amortization cost, right? And appreciation. Those are two big words. What does that mean even? So amortization is all based on how I take the amount that I owe and I elongate that amount over 30 years at an interest rate. So every single month, that balance is being increased by the interest rate I owe on that balance for that period of time. So if I take that balance and I take it by the term, 15 years, 20 years, 30 years, at a specific interest rate, I determine what my total amount paid in will be over that period of time. Now, if you pay extra on your balance at any given time, you drop that monthly balance, which drops your overall interest paid. But let's just assume you don't. So if I take that interest or the balance, accrue the interest over a 30-year period, I'm going to pay a large sum. Typically, on a 30-year, the interest, I hate to say this out loud, but it's true. The interest almost equals the principal balance, the purchase price, right? So if my original loan amount was $585,000, my interest is going to almost be that. And now with today's really low interest rates, maybe it's 550 or 520. I'd have to calculate that, but it's really close on the 30-year amortization because it's such a long period of time. The higher the interest rate, the more that interest bucket, then it reaches that amount, and sometimes it even goes over. So that's something to consider, especially when you decide how long a term you want to hold that mortgage and the impact that interest rate has on that longer term. So let's go back then to amortization, because every single month you're knocking that principal balance down. You're lowering that amount of total interest paid. So if I have a loan amount based on my $650,000 purchase and putting 10% down at the 3.125 interest rate, well then if I wait 6 months, I was paying rent to somebody else. Maybe I'm writing a check for $3,000 to my landlord, but I'm also missing out on that opportunity to pay down on my debt, my own debt. I'm paying my landlord's debt off. So that amortization pays down that principal balance every single month, accruing equity, right? That's how you get to the equity. If I have a loan balance originally at $585,000, every month I make a payment, a portion of that payment goes to principal, a larger portion in the beginning goes to interest, and it attacks that loan balance. So it goes 585 and it goes down, it goes down, it goes down. And over a period of time, that loan balance is 550, and then it's 500, and then it's 485 and 450. And that loan balance goes down, which is adding equity. Even if that value of the home stayed at $650,000, my equity is growing as the principal is being reduced, which is why I am such an avid fan of using real estate to build long-term wealth. And why I'm helping my kids purchase their own investment properties. They're young, they have time, they have 30 years. Even if that home doesn't appreciate, using rental income, somebody else is paying down their principal balance. I can go off tangent, and I've got a whole series of how to build wealth using real estate that I'll link down below. But in the meantime, going back to this, if you wait 6 months, you've lost that opportunity to pay down that principal balance. balance. Instead, you paid down your landlord's principal balance. So that's a missed opportunity. If you wait 6 months, that's almost $6,000. If you wait a year, that's almost $12,000. If you wait 2 years, that alone is almost $24,000 of missed opportunity, missed wealth that you've banked for yourself by paying that loan down. On the other side of that is the appreciation. That home, especially in the Denver market, even in the most turbulent of years, we only lost value during the Great Recession 4 years. Only 1 year was 11%. The other 3 years were under 3%. The Denver market is extremely stable. We lose very little value in a down market, and we have the opportunity to gain great value in up markets. So the odds of gaining value are very much in your favor. So if I go back and I use those very, very, very conservative appreciation amounts, 7% over the next year, even 4% over the following year, very small appreciation amounts, that is lost the longer I wait. For fear that the value might go down when the odds are stacked in my favor. If I didn't buy that $650,000 house, that house is now going to cost more in 6 months, in a year, or in 2 years. I know, ask anyone, and you know, if you've been searching for that perfect home over the last year and a half, you very well could have lost out on $100,000, $150,000 just in appreciation alone. That home will continue to gain value. In 6 months, that could cost you $16,000. In a year, that could cost you $47,000. In 2 years, that could cost you almost $75,000. In 2 years alone, between amortization and appreciation, that could be almost $100,000. Now, can you?
Oops. Okay.
So how did I transition from a homeless single mother to making up?
You guys. We're not going to start that over. You guys get that, right? I mean, she can perpetuate out those numbers forever and always. And the way her brain works is amazing to me. But yeah, I mean, you just think about it. And the truth is, like, what I tell people is if you have to be able to know if you can sell it and be okay in the next 3 months or 6 months, like, you shouldn't buy a house, right? But if you can think about buying it to hold on to it for a year, 2 years, 30 years, then that's when I say it's a no-brainer. Real estate as a long-term investment always works out. Like any other investment, if you're pushed to sell when it's low, then you're not going to be in a great space. But if you have the ability to hold on to it, which is the goal, you'll be fine. And with the way things have appreciated both historically and recently, you're going to be in good shape. Joy added that speaking of leveraging equity, you can do a cash out refi to pay off your student home loans, or excuse me, your student loans. She found that out recently and thought that was neat. I love that because that can really help your debt to income ratio. And also just, I hear of so many people who are paying down loans or think they're paying down loans and they're just not making the progress they want. And while amortizing a short-term loan over 30 years isn't ideal, I think that when you end up in a more of a like interest only or a low principal payment, it's definitely a great option. What I will leave you with, if I have no other questions, and we never have as many questions when we're on Zoom instead of in person. The in-person energy is always so much more fun. And we have this great space. I have to show you guys again. We have 3 of our amazing agents here, but this great comfortable space for you to come and learn and ask the questions about building wealth through real estate, or not, how to just budget, how to live life. We're happy to have safe conversations about money in this space. It's part of the reason that my husband and I purchased it to put it for the business, is to have this, we call it the agent lounge. The office is downstairs, but to allow us to have these conversations. So what I leave you with is when do you want to retire and what do you want to do with your time? Right? Those are kind of 2 questions. But I think that while we cannot fully predict any of our own future, right? We can really try to figure out how to plan for tomorrow while also still having a good day today. And while we look at those goals and we look down the road, it will help you create a manageable step-by-step process. We will help you create a manageable step-by-step process to get you there. I own this business. My husband's also an entrepreneur. So it's not like we're sitting on some traditional pension or retirement of some sort. And so real estate is our retirement. And I help people create that for themselves as well. So that when we are in our 60s, I don't see myself ever like really not working, but when we're in our 50s and 60s, we have choice. And I think that that's super, super amazing and really what I want to help other people do. And so be thinking about that. What's your vision? I want to be where it's not so hot. We're going to hopefully go to the mountains. I want to be where I can sit with coffee and look at the mountains. But yeah, what's your vision for that? And then the other thing I ask you is, how much can you pay a month comfortably? That is where we start every time we talk to people about their housing. What are you going to pay a month comfortably? And we will back into that. We will find a location that will work for that. We will find a type of house that will work for that. And we will make that happen. Those are the big questions. So there's the near future question of what do you want to pay a month? What are you comfortable? What's your max? What are you walking into type of thing, right? There's no such thing as a minimum, right? If you could pay $500 a month and live in a great house, we'd all love that. But then also on the other extreme of that is, when do you want to retire? And what do you want to be doing when you do it? When do you want to be at the place where you get to make those kinds of decisions? We can get aggressive with investment strategy, especially if you're willing to move, and we can make some changes pretty quick. Or we can take our time. If you enjoy what you do and you're not necessarily wanting to have that choice immediately, then we can, do some long-term planning as well. Our next class is virtual only, intended as such. On Thursday, we're doing putting the real back into real estate investing, real women, real stories, real success, real stories. And so we'll be interviewing an investor who still has not been, she has been notified, Amy, it's still not you. But yeah, has not even been announced. So just wait till I announce it, the edge of your seats. But what we'll be telling there is just really talking about the realities of it. A lot of people want to talk about, especially if you listen to Bigger Pockets, or you're kind of, when you're watching $1 Million Listing, if you're a Bravo fan, and the glitz and the glam and the numbers, and I've got 400 doors and I'm this and I'm that, and the doors and the millions and the reality is you probably don't need all of that to live the life you want to live and give to the community you want to give and all of that. So what we are going to be continuing to do with this series is telling real investor stories and what that looks like for them, and then what it can look like for you. The journey is personalized. No two journeys are the same. And we just want to be here to help you start that journey. I think Sarah has a question. I think she raised her hand.
Hi, first of all, I'm so sorry I was late. I got stuck in a meeting for school, for work. I'm a teacher, so I'm really sorry I'm late. But for one thing you mentioned was, you can back into like what works for you. How much do you make? How much can you pay? And I feel like I get stuck of where to start, because I might make this much living in LA, but if I don't want to live in LA and I want to move somewhere else, like a smaller town, I probably won't make as much. So do I have to find the job first to find the house, or do I assume I'm going to make less and find the average? And then, like I don't do anything because I don't know which thing to do first. So I don't know if you talked about that in future things, or maybe you did and I'm sorry I missed it, but.
No, you're totally fine. And we're going to follow up with the recording too. So whatever you did have to miss, no big deal. I do think that ultimately you figure out where you want to be. Then we figure out what the average income is going to look like, or what your income would look like. And then, the rule my dad taught me, which is a little bit old, is you want to not spend more than 1/3 of your net income. So it's pretty tight. I would say now it's more like 1/3 of a gross income. And so you get on your housing. And so that's how I would look at that from there. And I mean, with if you are a teacher, I mean, that's at least public, right? What people make.
It is
At least
public.
ranges.
Yeah, there are, but I know LAUSD pays definitely more than most school districts, but it's also aging me like a dog. So I probably won't stay there. So I know that, like, okay, well,
Yeah.
yeah. So I'm like, oh, well, I saved a lot of money over the last 10 years, but should I be planning on dipping into that, or should I base it on just what I would currently be making at this new job and a new place I want, you know?
Yeah. Well, I would love to kind of talk through scenarios with you, like more specific. If you're
Okay.
looking at a school district in Colorado, what the averages are there, and then backing into, because the other thing, when you think about payment, that's a huge factor. And I always want to open this up to people across the US, but I obviously don't know taxes as well, where everyone is as I do here. This taxes in Denver area are really low. And so that positively affects what you can afford relative to my home state of Illinois. That said, it may not be really low compared to a Dakota. Like I have no idea, right? And do both Dakotas have the same taxes? I have no idea. There has to be different because there's a South and a North now. But those are all the things that you're looking at with payments. We'll also send out, after this, we're going to send out a couple of resources, including a link to start looking at homes, just browsing at homes on our website. And we actually have a payment calculator next to them that factors into account the local taxes. And it doesn't have the problem with a lot of the like third party, or I guess those are like a brokerage now, but they always put in the most enticing terms. And so it's 20% down at the lowest potential rate with a buy down, like all the things. So it looks like the payment's really low. Ours is actually set to 10% down because that tends to be the average across new home buyer or first time home buyers, as well as second time or resale home buyers. So ours has it at that. And then we're at 3.25% interest rate. So it's not even like a highly optimized interest rate. So it can be good for looking for those ideas because you do have to take into account all those different variables. That was a really long answer.
Okay. All right.
But do you
really
rent now?
Yeah, I'm like can't commit to scared to commit to anything. And I'm like, is it almost like a joke for a teacher to be looking for a house by themselves? Like, is that haha, yeah, right. Good luck with that. No. Okay.
No.
Unless I'm married to some engineer or something. Like, do I have a chance in hell of getting a house? Like,
yes,
I mean,
always.
Money, but you know, okay. Because the cost of living in LA and what a teacher makes, it's just not realistic. So, but I'll look elsewhere.
I think the cost of living in LA is really hard for most, right? For most working Americans.
Right.
Like, I feel like a lot of, and maybe it's just because I don't, there's a lot of like old wealth and stuff in factor, right?
Definitely.
Yeah.
But I look forward to continuing later with you and talking more for sure. I don't want to hold people up. Thank you.
No, for sure. Absolutely. Thanks for asking. We'll talk to you soon. Anyone else? Well, thank you guys so much. Like I said, I'll be following up with the 5 steps to getting started. We have a how to buy a house step-by-step short video. It's 12 minutes. And then make sure you guys see that like shopping link. And then, yeah, we'll just stay in touch with you guys and make sure you always know of any of our upcoming courses. Our goal is always to educate. And so we're always happy to have everyone on here, and we look forward to seeing you again soon. Bye.